Hey everyone! Welcome back to Witch Cove Crafts. So, I've been a little preoccupied lately, thanks to an upcoming game release from the wonderful Loot Studios, Malediction. It's basically Magic meets Warhammer 40k Kill Team, and to top it all off, I can only describe the setting as Dragonlance by way of Elden Ring. Now, I haven't really been filming this because, 1, there's a ridiculous number of miniatures in each box, and 2, I'm definitely not the person for a painting tutorial. But I didn't want to completely pause on video projects, and I got to thinking, what could I do that would not only make my game better, but maybe yours as well? What if we added lights? And for that, the perfect candidate is the Husks, the game's objective markers that represent wells of powerful magic from which game-altering relics can be claimed. So off to Blender we go! First, we need to load in the files. One of my favorite things about Malediction is the fact that you get an entire faction's STL files in the box. That means not only can you make as many as you want or need, but it's really easy to modify things, since Blender supports STLs out of the box. And remember, since Blender is open source, it'll always be free. You can just try it right now if you want. I had pretty good success with that little battery-powered diorama you might remember from a few weeks ago. So let's build on that concept. First, we're going to need to find a way to get a light through these. An LED filament should just work, so we'll block out a simple cylinder to fit that in. Then on the base, we can block out a reference for the battery, and expand the shape to make a nice slot. This way the battery can double as the switch by sliding back and forth. Once that's sorted, and we're sure there will be room for the battery, we can block out holes for the magnets. We think 3mm should be enough, and still retain plenty of strength after being soldered to hold everything in place. But we'll pop a couple extras in that aren't connected to the circuit, just to be safe. Then we'll need one on either end of the channel, one for the positive battery connection, and another to hold the battery in the off position. Once we cut out all these holes using a Boolean modifier, we'll also want to add some wire channels to run the wires through for the contact point magnets. The top magnet will connect to the bottom of the battery, which is the negative terminal, and the side magnet will connect to the positive terminal, which on a button battery is the side and top. And then after modifying the magnet and core layout to make sure it's ideal for each husk, we can print everything out. Opaque for the bases, and clear for the husks. After cleaning things up, and carrying any leftover resin, it's time to put all the non-circuit magnets in, using the thinnest superglue possible. Just one drop should be enough. Now at this point, I did some small lighting tests off camera, and decided to print another round of the husks, but this time I mixed in some opaque white dye. This really helps to diffuse and scatter the light more evenly. Now it's time for soldering. First, we can connect filaments to wire, as close to the lights as possible so we can trim off the extra connection, and then we can attach our first magnet. Remember, when soldering magnets, it is critical to attach your magnet to a much bigger magnet so that your tiny magnet doesn't lose its polarity as it heats up. And it doesn't hurt to get copper tips for your soldering iron so that it's not constantly attaching itself to the magnet. I highly recommend doing one magnet at a time and then gluing it into place right afterwards. Remember that LEDs are not bidirectional circuits, so it's critical that you glue the right magnet in the right spot. Do it now so you don't mix it up later. Then you can solder in your second magnet and pop it in too, running the wire through the channel to keep it out of the way. Then it's time to feed the filament into the husk, and this is best accomplished with something soft, like a Q-tip or one of these soft foam sanding sticks. Once you're sure everything is working, glue the husk down to its base. And then finally, before painting, mask off any areas that are going to be brightly lit with a liquid mask. In my case, that's just the inner core of the husk, and we'll worry about the rest later. Then we can take it outside to prime it in black. Do a couple of coats. You'll be surprised at how much light can actually get through a seemingly black miniature. It doesn't have to be perfect though. Before we do anything else, let's add some variety to the light with clear inks. I used yellow and red, but you could really use any color. Just make sure your LED underneath has all the colors you're tinting in. A pure red LED under a blue and purple color scheme wouldn't do much. Cool and warm whites are the way to go for this technique. So, with the lights on, we can go over any areas the primer didn't quite cover enough with black, leaving only the bits we want illuminated. To make the lighting stand out, we're going to keep it simple and stone gray, built up gradually with a mixture of warm and cool grays using a dry brush technique. I love to use a cheap makeup brush for this. They work great. And once the dry brushing is done, don't forget to go back in and hand paint some highlights to really make it pop and draw attention to the areas of most important focus. And finally, a slimy wash weathers and grounds it. Now, one last step. We want to bring back a bit of the light. To do this, I used my Gun Plus scribing chisel, but you could really use anything small and sharp. Very carefully, we can go in and scrape off the paint and primer anywhere we want light, like between these ribs or in any of the eyes. This was actually inspired by the way they used to do matte paintings for movies. Paint the design on glass and then light it from behind and scratch off anything lit with a razor. And if you do mess up and scratch something you didn't mean to, just go back over it with a little bit of paint. Now, let's make them all a little unique. I'm thinking a Four Seasons vibe. For fall, we can use some watered down white glue and brown and beige static graphs on the base, followed by these little scale leaves. And to give it a really weathered feel, we can crush up some of the leaves and sprinkle them into all the nooks and crannies where they might have gathered. For winter, we'll need snow. This white snow effect sand will work as a great base, but we can mix it up with some Mod Podge and a little bit of white paint to get something even more useful. Once the consistency feels good and gooey, we can use a grungy brush to dab it onto the husk anywhere where it would build up in drifts. Take your time with this. Less is often more with an effect like this. You don't want to completely bury all your hard work. And once we have enough bulky snowdrifts done, we can go back with some white paint to scratch in some soft, frosty detail across broader parts of the model. For spring, an overgrown vine and moss vibe will be just perfect. Vines come courtesy of some craft vines, which are literally just dried out roots. If you don't have any appropriate plant types in your area, you can definitely grab some online for very little. The dried roots can be broken up and carefully tacked into place with drops of glue. And once that's set, we can paint in some white glue and spread terrain flocking over everything, and then blow off the extra. For summer, a dusty dry brush coat and some scale brambles will give a suitably parched and heat-blasted look for the world. Now, I do want to add one last effect, but first we should top coat. It's extra important with these because even just a little bit of a scratch on the paint will be very noticeable with the light shining through. Once the top coat sets, we can add the last bit to really sell the grimy and gothic nature of the husks. A little UV resin, mixed with some red dye, and pooled in the center of the husks and dribbled down the fronts. For some fine accent streaks of blood, use gloss medium with red dye and a touch of paint instead. It'll dry slightly clear, but still shiny, and it can be streaked on much more finely than the resin can. And as a last touch, we'll clean up the bases. Although not with Musso Black for once. While Musso Black is great, it's quite fragile, and it wouldn't hold up to repeated handling and gameplay very well. And with that, they're ready. And there you have it. Glowing, gory centerpieces for all your Malediction battles. If you want to try making them for yourself, I've created simple mod files and uploaded them to Thingiverse. Just load your Husk files in Blender, load in the appropriate mod file, boolean, and print away. I'm resisting the urge to make every mini with a glowing element light up like this. I do actually want to be able to play sometime soon, but maybe Countess Morida needs a little light? Let me know if there's any printable minis you would like to see modified this way. Maybe I'll do them in a future video. In the meantime, I'm going to go back to finishing off all my Malediction armies so I get back to my next big project, from a very, very different setting in a galaxy far, far away. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, here on Witch Cove Crafts.